Hello everyone! My name is Oge Mora and I am an author and illustrator. I was so looking forward to be with you all in Japan. I've never been to Japan, so it was extra exciting. But unfortunately, with the global pandemic, what can you do? So I'm here in Providence, Rhode Island. That's where I live here in the States. And I'm currently in my studio. And so usually when I do presentations, I'll show images of my studio, but I don't need to because we're here today. So thanks for stopping by. So as I mentioned, I am a children's book author and illustrator. And I had a book that most recently came out in Japan called Thank You Amu, and so here it's here. And I also have a book that I, again, wrote and illustrated called Saturday. And this one I don't think is available in Japan, but it's just my most recent book, is another book I have called The Oldest Student, How Mary Walker Learned to Read. And so, yeah. It was a really wild kind of journey to become a picture book author and illustrator. I definitely didn't think in my head, even when I went to art school, that that was going to be my path, but I'm so happy it was. But definitely looking back at my life, I can see how I ended up where I am today. And I think the thing that's so exciting about this conference and what I love telling kids is, and parents and teachers, is people always ask me, okay, where did books really begin for you? When did you really get into reading? What was that spark? And I love that question because I know exactly where books really started for me, and it was at my local library. And the cool thing about my local library, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, even though I live in Rhode Island right now, is that it was right across the street from my house. Literally, here's my house, and then the library's right beside it. And so the library was my neighbor growing up. And so as you would think, growing up and being right by the library, I was literally there all the time. And it was like a second home to me and my 7 siblings, that every day after school we would go to the library and we would be there till it closed. And I just loved going there. There were so many programs that happened at the library. I learned to play chess at the library. We would have speakers come into the library that I could interact with. I made friends with the kids in my neighborhood at the library. And so it was just this really, really amazing experience being there at that library. And my most favorite part of the library was the children's book section. And I love the children's book section when I was a kid because I loved being read to. And then I loved it as I grew older. And I think the thing for me is I never grew out of children's books, I just really love that marriage between these images and words and really getting to play with that relationship in such a short and brief format as the picture book. And so I would kind of spend my days before I went to college reading these picture books that I got from the library. And so I think that those experiences and all those books I read, those are the books I have in mind. I'm looking to recreate those experiences for children today. I think of the books that made me smile as a child, like Tar Beach by Faith Ringgold or Stregonona by Tomie dePaola, and the experience of reading those books. And that's that magic of that page turn and that glee that you experience as a kid when you read that book for the first time is what I want to recreate for my readers, And I think what's really special about being a children's book author and illustrator is I know how much those books meant to me and how the experience of reading those books transformed my life. And so it's very humbling knowing that a child's first kind of experience of the world through literature might be through you. And that's really lucky kind of path that I'm in, and I'm very grateful for that, and it's a very humbling thing. I have that in my head every time that Tommy DePaula has this really amazing quote where he says that children deserve the very best. And so I definitely want to give my very best to kids in every book that I create. I want to tell you a little bit more about my books. I'm rambling all about myself. I could do it all day, but we should talk about my books. And so I'm going to talk about a book in particular. I can't talk about all of them, but I'd love to talk about my book, Thank You, Amu, because this, I'm so grateful, is was translated in Japanese, and so it's available. So yeah, I have this book called Thank You, Amu. And Thank You, Amu is a story of, we meet our character, Amu, on this page. And so here's Amu. And here Amu is cooking a thick red stew in a big fat pot for a nice evening meal. And so she sets out, she's making this stew and she's stirring it, and she's certain it's going to be the very best dinner she's ever had. But as she kind of goes through this book, she realizes she starts to get a lot of different guests. And so we can see here a little boy. We can see, see over here a police officer that comes through. Let's see who else comes by. A hot dog vendor. And I won't give away the ending of the book, but yes, it's about Amu, and she's made this fabulous stew that has this magical stew scent that travels all throughout her city and brings a lot of interesting characters to her door. And every time a character stops by, and they tell her, wow, it smells amazing, that looks delicious, Amu has the reaction to share. You know, she decides to give some of her stew, and she gives it and gives it and gives it until there's not any stew left. But even though there isn't any stew left at the end, what happens is all the people that she had fed that day come back, and Amu's like, oh, I don't have any stew left. And she's like, we're not here to ask, we're here to give. And they all give her food, and a little boy gives her a thank you note. And you might notice that the pattern that's on the thank you note is the same pattern that you see in the stew pot, because they're equal in value, you know. They're all about giving of the heart. And even though she doesn't end up with stew, her heart is full of happiness and love, and she has the best dinner she's ever had. And this story, is a story very dear to my heart. And actually, I first wrote this when I was in college, where we had to write something that was productive, so something's being gained over time in a story, or something that was reductive, something's being lost over time in a story. And rather than thinking of something just being gained over time or something being lost over time, I wanted to construct a story where, yeah, something's being lost over time, but something's being gained. And so the stew is lost, that physical stew is lost, but something intangible, that warmth, that community, that's gained. And so I just kind of wanted to present that for young readers. And what's been really amazing, people experiencing this book, is that teachers have come to me and talked about how they're using this book as a way to introduce sharing to kids, and introduce the idea of gratitude to children, and introduce what does it mean to share with someone, what does it mean to give to someone, why do we do these things, and really beginning to have that conversation with them through this book. And so I think that that's very, very, very exciting. Another thing I think might be a good thing to talk about are the illustrations that you see in this book. So the illustrations that you see in this book were all made by me. You actually, over here, you might see in the back, my background, I pulled this out, is a piece that was from this actual book. I use cut paper and paint and old knickknacks and things, anything that I can find. And I just like to craft these different collages that you'll see in this book. And I particularly love found pieces of paper, old book scraps, because I just think there's something magical about this old piece of paper that no one wants anymore, that's all riddled and aged. But the cool thing about being an artist, and I tell kids this all the time, is you get to take that thing that people might think is junk or doesn't have any use or any value. And if you have a vision for it, you can put it on the page and you can reveal the beauty in that thing that everyone was overlooking, you know? And I always tell kids that creativity is all about open your eyes to the magic that's all around you. And so I definitely have that in mind as I craft each page. It's just little moments of magic that I can create for my readers. So here's just some of the work that you'll see in this book. I also love color too. And so when I was first sketching this book, I didn't really know how I was going to put everything together, but I knew that this book needed to have a bright, warm sky and very rich illustrations because I wanted them to feel as rich and as warm as my grandmother's stew made me feel as a child. And I think that's actually a perfect transition because Amu is not Amu, which is the Igbo word. It's a language spoken in Nigeria, where my parents are from. That means queen, is what I used to call my grandmother when she was with us. Now she's only with us in spirit, but when she was here with us, I called my grandmother Amu. And she made the most amazing pot of Nigerian stew, and I loved it so much, and it's my favorite food to this day. And there was just something special about my grandmother's table, and everyone had a place on this table, and we would just all come together. It didn't matter who you were, everyone had a place there. My grandmother would cater to you and take care of you. And what's been really special about having this book and out into the world is the stories that you collect over time. You know, people will tell me this reminds me of my Portuguese grandmother, or oh, this reminds me of a dish we used to make as a kid. And so I always like to tell people that this book really isn't about stew, but it's about food's magical ability to bring us all together. That who are the Amus in your life, or who are the, what are the foods that mean something to you, that bring you and your community together, and how can we celebrate us coming together and that warmth that we can all have when we're all close, you know. And so that's something that's definitely on my mind when I make my work. And the awards I got for this picture book, Thank You Amu was my very first book, and I am very pleased to say that I'm so lucky to have received quite a few awards for it. I won the Caldecott honor for this book, which is one of the highest illustration awards that you can get for children's book illustration here in the States. I also won a Coretta Scott King Award for New Talent. As a Black artist, that truly meant a lot to me. One of my favorite books as a kid was Snowy Day by Ezra Jack Keats. And I also won the Ezra Jack Keats Award in illustration. And so that was also a truly amazing experience. But, you know, it's nice to win awards and get the recognition for the work that you do and get the trophy or whatever, or sticker or whatever, plaque and things like that. But I think the real thing that I feel very grateful for that recognition is it definitely gives you more of a platform, and it introduces you to more people and more readers. And I think when I think about what I value the most about the work that I do, it's the people who read my books mean so much to me. And so the idea that there are more eyes on my work and more people who read my books or are introduced to my stories through these awards is something that I'm so grateful for. And I feel that's a great transition to the fact that Thank You Amu was also selected for the Sustainable Development Goals Book Club's Goal 2 for the Zero Hunger reading list from the United Nations. And when I first heard that, I just was really floored, you know? This little story that I had written while I was in college has literally gone international and is a story that people are looking at when we're thinking about the world's biggest problems. And so I think that just is really representative of the work that librarians, authors, editors, children's book illustrators, and writers do. The fact that we are that first experience for so many children means you have a lot of impact. And I'm so grateful that the United Nations and people from all over recognize that and are using literature in order to advance the global community. And so it's very interesting reading through and reflecting on these sustainable development goals and thinking about what can we do as authors, what can we do as illustrators, what can we do as librarians and teachers to really work on these goals. And when we think about these goals, they're very lofty. You know, this idea of zero hunger, like ending world hunger. That's a big goal. And when I think about how arduous and how almost intimidating a lot of these goals can feel looking at them as like one individual, I'm actually reminded of my book, Thank You, Amu. Usually when I read Thank You, Amu, or when I've interacted with people who've read Thank You, Amu, they're like, it's so nice that Amu's community came to be there for her and they supported her in the end. Isn't so nice that it all happened and was such a happy ending? And it's not always like that in real life. And I would agree, it isn't always like that in real life. But I think that's not the point, you know? I think what Amu does in this book is she opens her heart. She risks her heart to connect with someone else. And whenever you risk your heart, whenever you put that hand out, there's always a chance that you're going to be rejected or it's not going to work the way you would have wanted. But I think it's not about focusing on the times when we're left out in the cold, when we try to give warmth and love to other people. It's about what kind of communities do we want to live in? What kind of world do we want to be a part of? What kind of themes and values do we believe in? And we can't make our decisions based on fear of if we're rejected or things don't go as planned or that something is hard and isn't easy and is not going to happen tomorrow or in 10 years or 20 years. We have to aspire to things. We have to work and live in this world by those values, you know? That's the only way that we can impart change. And so it's hard, but we always just have to remember what we believe in, what kind of world we want to see. And if we can focus on that vision, then we can become a part of something greater. And if we risk our hearts and we put our hand out and we really try to take on these initiatives, we find that we're not the only ones who value these things. And when we're working as a community, as we see in a book like Thank You, Amu, there's so many things that we can accomplish that would feel daunting for just the regular individual. And so I guess when I think of authors and illustrators and writers and teachers and librarians and editors and what we as a global children's literature community can do in terms of these goals, I think we have to keep doing what we're doing. And we have, as you're writing, what kind of world do we want children to see and understand and experience, and really consider that. I think that's what's going to kind of give that foundation, because when we think about these goals, these are goals that probably won't be solved in our lifetimes and might not be solved in the children of today's lifetimes, but the idea that we are tasked with creating these worlds through books that can help children envision a new world is a very, very special role. And it's not something I, as a creator, take lightly. And even though there are so many children who don't receive the help and the care and the nourishment that they deserve, we got to keep fighting for it. We got to keep aspiring to do exactly that and be there for all the children. And I think that especially with librarians and teachers and people who are working directly with students, it can sometimes feel daunting or just exhausting. And sometimes you can wonder, is it worth it? Am I making an impact? Everything I'm doing, it feels so small. But when I think of the librarians at my local library, or the teachers that I had, or the books that carried me when I needed it most as a child, those books, those experiences, those people had a transformative impact in my life. And I definitely wouldn't be where I am today without them. And so it can at times feel daunting and like we're just too small for these large problems that we have. But we just have to kind of keep hope and remember that these books are the book that a librarian is going to put in a child's hand. It's just going to have untold impact on their life and on their mindset. And we just, as I said earlier, as Tomie dePaula said, we just have to give our very best, because that's exactly what children deserve. What are my future plans? Well, I am here and I just finished another book. I might take a little break just to play around with more papers and things like that, or reorganize my studio and whatnot, and brainstorm some new stories. I definitely want to write some new stories, and also illustrate some other people's stories, which is always exciting as well. So I think my future plans are to just stay very creative and just keep making, I think that's something that gives me so much joy, and I'm so grateful I have the opportunity to do. And so I'm going to just keep making the books as long as they let me. I do have some ideas for my next picture book. I won't tell you anything yet, but I do have some ideas, and hopefully they will work out well, and it will be a book that people and children will enjoy. So fingers crossed for that. What kind of books would I want to create in the future? I think if there's anything I could say about the books that I want to create, I want books that at their heart are geared for children, and books that open our minds, and books that challenge me, whether it's by the subject matter or by the medium. I work in collage, but I'm not married only to collage. I kind of want to see where the stories lead me. And so I'm hoping that the stories will lead me into new exciting paths that I can take with all of you. So I think that's what I would say. Do I plan to visit Japan? Yes. I can say one of my, I think we all could agree that 2020 was definitely a year of disappointments. I wish I was as peppy sometimes as Abe and her mother are in my book Saturday. Um, and one of my greatest disappointments was not getting a chance to be with all of you in person. I was really excited to meet with you all and visit Japan. But I was talking with a friend, and once the world kind of returns to some sort of normalcy, or we're allowed to leave our homes and uh, travel outside the country without too much hassle, I want to take a vacation. And I was talking to a friend, and we both want to go to Japan. And so we'll have a travel buddy. And so I definitely plan to go to Japan, hopefully in the very near future. And I'm so excited to check out the museums and eat the different foods and things like that. So my email is okemura@gmail.com. If you have any suggestions for me when I get a chance to visit, feel free to let me know. There was a woman who she and her husband own a Nigerian restaurant in Tokyo. And so that's on my list to visit when I go. So I would be definitely very excited to do that. I'm looking forward to, once things the global pandemic kind of meets its end, to venture out and to visit. And so there's that. I'm very excited for that. Once again, this has been absolutely amazing. I hope this has entertained you in some way. I've been entertained. I hope everyone has a wonderful 2021. I hope there are a lot more amazing things that occur for us all in 2021 in comparison to 2020. And yes, all I can say is thank you all for having me, and for supporting your libraries, and for supporting these goals, and for supporting literature. And I wish you all a very sunny rest of your year. So, goodbye.